Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is, pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a comedy podcast to help you find your inspiration. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. Thanks so much for being here. Very much appreciate it. We have a great guest today, Mr. Aaron Wiener. He is a writer, an author, and content creator. But first, may I just remind you to please nominate us for the Podcast Awards. We have a link in the bio giving you the details on how you can do that. You have until July 31st to do that for us, and we'd much appreciate it. Let's get right to today's episode. As mentioned, it is with writer, author, and content creator Aaron Wiener, who's done a ton of things in the industry. He's been a script coordinator, a script manager. He talks about the differences between those, the writer's room. He's worked on a ton of different things. Ground Floor, The Soul Man, AP Bio. I think he's great, and he gives a lot of really sound advice that I think is really going to be actionable for you to use if you are looking for a career in writing. So why don't we just get right to it? Here's my chat with Aaron Wiener. You went to University of Florida. Are you from Florida, though?
Yeah, I grew up in South Florida, and I was really lucky. While I was growing up, there was an incredible scholarship program that was available to people who were living in state. I, at the time, had some other ideas about where I may have wanted to go to college. And I remember, qualifying for this scholarship and having the conversation with my parents at the dinner table of, well, you got this full scholarship to the University of Florida. And what I can say about that experience is that it was the best decision I ever made. Yeah. I had visited some of the other schools that I was hoping to attend after going to the University of Florida, and actually realized that the bigger state school was really the place for me. I really enjoyed the football program there, the basketball program there. We had between 40 and 50,000 undergrads. So it really felt like a city that was, built around the college.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. Did you play any sports?
I did when I was growing up, but not for this school. Unfortunately, one of the setbacks of going to a school like Florida is that unless you are very good at sports, chances are you're not just going to walk on the team. We actually did have a couple walk-ons while I was there, but I think they were walking on with some skills that I maybe didn't have.
Yeah, I know that you majored in poli-sci while you were there. At the time, did you already know you wanted to be a writer and you wanted to get into writing, or was this and this was maybe the backup plan, or what? What was your mindset with that?
Sure, absolutely. So when I was growing up, I was always the kid who was memorizing movies and TV shows, and what I was doing, and without maybe even realizing it, was that I was relating those story beats in movies and TV shows to moments in my life at home and at school, and I would bring them up and reference them with family and friends. And I think that was when I kind of realized that I had the special stuff, if you will, that goes into being a producer and or a writer, seeing the story in the world, if you will, and being able to recognize those moments for what they were.
Oh, nice. That's cool. What kind of shows were you getting into? Like what was it that was piquing your interest that way?
It was really anything I could get my hands on, a lot of movies that were coming out during the time. I actually finally just got around to watching the latest Bill and Ted's movie this week.
Oh yeah.
Excellent to each other. And party on, dudes.
It had been on my list for a while, really enjoyed that. And, that was obviously a big part of my youth growing up.
Yeah.
I think that time in our storytelling world was such an important time. If you look back to those years, there were just so many iconic films. Ferris Bueller's Day Off for sure was one of my favorites growing up.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while. You could miss it.
And, a lot of the shows that were kind of on TV at the time, and what's really nice is a lot of those shows are now seeing reboots and new versions.
Yeah.
So you get to kind of relive those same themes and emotions and arcs for the characters, which is nice.
That's so true. You mentioned that time period. I mean, the 80s, you had Ghostbusters and Back to the Future and Indiana Jones and Superman and then Batman. And now we are seeing this resurgence, or it's, maybe, this is just the time period for the adult versions of a lot of those things. There's a lot of reference to those things because I guess our age group is just still getting catered to, or maybe our age group is making the stuff that's referencing those things. So there is this nostalgia, that era that our generation is going through, and it is like bringing back the stuff from the 80s and 90s.
Absolutely, and I think even greater connection is the emotions and the feelings that those stories bring out in us.
Yeah.
I always like to talk about, the human experience is the real intellectual property, right?
Yeah.
How do we relate to those characters? How are those stories reflecting on our own lives, and how are we relating our journeys to those of the characters? And I think that's a great segue to actually answer your question about political science. I knew that I wanted to have more of a well-rounded learning experience at the university, and I wanted to kind of take classes that were in different disciplines. And so it was important to me to have a major where I would be writing and I would be thinking about different ways of looking at different perspectives. And I think poli-sci just kind of fit for that. And if you think about it, a lot of different opinions that people have in the political world are actually sometimes aspects of different characters and stories. Taking different approaches in politics can absolutely be the drives of different characters in a story. And so that was a very sort of relatable and interesting, way that I was able to kind of look at what I was doing. And so, I didn't really have any specific plans to pursue this career in Los Angeles until I was in college. I met a friend in school who had done an internship out here at Paramount Pictures the summer before, and was really impressed by the city and by the opportunity, and had heard that they were looking for interns for the next year. And, we became friends, and he was planning on coming out after graduation to get a job and start working. And so we made a plan that I would come out and do the internship and then just kind of see what happened. And that was almost 20 years ago.
Wow. And I love that line, the human experience is the real intellectual property. That may not be exactly how you worded it, but I love that concept because you're right. I mean, that is what is in everything, is the human experience. Like what people feel, how people are affected by things, that is always in art.
Yeah, and I think if you watch movies and TV shows, at least for me, when I'm watching them, those are the things that really I relate to is seeing those characters experiencing things that are similar or not similar to my experience, and watching them go through those aspects of their journeys.
Yeah, and I wonder, because for me, I've noticed in recent years when there's a phone by my side and I'm picking it up while I'm watching something, that it takes me out of that experience. And I'm not even remembering things about movies as well because I'm not experiencing that part of watching movies and television shows where I'm connecting and relating to this portrayal of the human experience and the human condition.
Yeah, I think that's another interesting thing to think about is that when I was a kid watching a lot of these movies and TV shows, I couldn't be bothered by other things.
Right.
If maybe I could be on one of the lines at my house while I was watching a movie, but that was it was a lot less frequent, and I wasn't picking up my phone and being distracted other ways. And so, yeah, I think that I was definitely able to focus a lot more on one specific piece of content at a time, back then, whereas today, maybe we have, something on one screen and we're looking at our phone at the same time. I know that there's been a lot of talk in the industry about more casual viewing and shows that you can kind of have on for ambiance and things like that. So that's a very interesting thing to think about.
When we were talking about how there are things from the 80s that are coming back with reboots, are there any shows or movies that you loved as a kid that if it got a reboot, you would love to work on that?
Yeah, there absolutely are. I've been following Cobra Kai very closely. I'm a big fan of what they're doing on their show, and I can't really say anything specifically about this, but there are some things that are in the works on my end where I'm trying to sort of pitch and work on some similar ideas. Because I think that, like I said before, I think that characters from films where we really were able to connect are sort of entry points into story and ways to create new opportunities for story. And so I think that what the guys at Cobra Kai did is brilliant, and the work that they're doing on that show, and I think they're doing it in a very smart way.
Yeah, that's super cool. I actually have not watched Cobra Kai yet because my girlfriend hasn't seen the Karate Kid movies, and I haven't seen them in a long time. So I kind of want to rewatch them and then get into the show if I can. But then that's like an investment of time, I guess, for her. So we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, you may actually surprise yourself. One of the great things I love about movies is that the movie stays the same, but you change around it as you grow up. I've watched countless movies over the past few years and seen something new that I had never seen before, or noticed something new that I had never noticed before. And it's because I'm seeing it with totally different eyes, right? I'm not seeing it as someone who's in their 20s or even teens. I'm seeing it as someone who's older. So even if it's a brief interaction between two characters, maybe something going on in the background, a piece of a particular story arc that I didn't necessarily understand, or even a line that I didn't hear the right way, are things that I can now see differently and appreciate a second or third time.
For sure. I mean, my favorite movie was a movie made in 1985, and so culture was very different. And while certain aspects of that movie are not a surprise to me because I watch it every year, and I've seen it hundreds of times, there's nothing that's really a surprise to me necessarily, but I do have a different mindset now because I have changed, and that movie is staying the same. And there's something that is comforting about that when you can go back and watch it. But then there's certain things where you're like, that person was being really inappropriate. And I didn't really see it that way when I was a kid watching this movie.
I also remember as a kid watching movies where maybe something, happened to the characters that was sad or I didn't like. And I always remember watching a movie a second or third time and hoping that it would be a different, there would be a different ending, but it would always be the same. So, I think that also speaks to what I was talking about before, and really being invested in the characters and their journeys and identifying with their arcs and their struggles.
Yeah. Yeah. You've been able to work on a number of really great projects and in various roles as well. You've been a writer's assistant, and and that was, let me just so the listeners hear it, before we get into the ins and outs of the roles, let's just talk about some of the stuff you've worked on. You've worked on AP Bio as a script coordinator, and also Bones. You've worked on that show. You were an assistant to a producer on that show, correct?
Yes, for almost 3 seasons there.
Yeah. And Soul Man, you're a writer's assistant on that. You worked on Ground Floor as well, the TBS show. It had Roy Scovel. This is one of the big comedians who worked on that show, but of course it was created by Bill Lawrence. So you've seen a lot of stuff. You've worked with a lot of really great people. Obviously, that shows what you're capable of, but also it means you've seen and learned a lot from working in all these different roles, which is what I think really cool. So when you're a writer's assistant, I was wondering what exactly that role entails.
Sure, that's a great question. So let me just first say that when I was working at Bones, I actually started reading Malcolm Gladwell and was really fascinated with not only what he wrote, but the way that he wrote it. And I actually read his entire archive from the New Yorker. It took me about 3 or 4 months because they're very sizable articles and there are many of them. But it was really an enjoyable experience because, again, the content was fantastic. But what I really was looking for was I was trying to break down the way that he wrote and to understand his process and the way that he presented material because it was so appealing to me to read. And then I read his books and became fascinated with this idea of the 10,000 hours of mastery, which I think has become part of our talk about career and life in society. And so, I decided that I was going to make my job be my goal and sort of double down on the working in the place that you ultimately want to be. So that because I knew that I was going to be spending, let's say 8 to 16 hours a day working on TV shows. So if you divide that, into 10,000, you're actually not looking at a ton of time if you're actually devoting those hours. And it was very hard work, and it continues absolutely to be very hard work. But I think that in all of these experiences, there is a skill set that you're developing as a writer's assistant, script coordinator, and a writer. But there's also a unique knowledge that you gain from each show that you work on, because I think that each show does things differently from others. And you're also, I think, at a point able to say, okay, well, here are some of the things that seem to be universal in any room on any show. And then here are some of the things that may be different on this particular show.
Oh, interesting.
And
what are some of the things, not to cut you off, but what are a couple of things that are universal?
Well, so I think there's a general rule for how, I won't say rule, but a general idea of how writers' rooms work, how people share their ideas, how they give feedback on other people's ideas, and how you're able to create something in a certain period of time with a lot of voices and a lot of different ideas in the room. Sort of, an ideation factory, if you will. And I think that some of the best rooms that I've been in really were able to achieve a level of flow in their work where things just came out very naturally, and everyone was able to contribute and felt listened to and heard in the process. And so I think that's something that I think a lot of people are keeping in mind on various shows. But there are also different ways that people do it. Sometimes people are working on stuff together in larger groups. Sometimes things are broken up. Sometimes people will go off and do certain things on their own. It's really a question of how things are divided up on each particular show. And that differs. That also differs between comedy and drama. One of the things that's different about the writer's assistant and script coordinator job traditionally in comedy and drama is that in comedy, the script coordinator does spend a lot of time in the writer's room, and they actually do a lot of the same things that the writer's assistant do, because being in the room on a comedy really there's a lot more time, I think, spent working on scripts as a group. And so those hours need to be split up, more efficiently within the department. On dramas traditionally, and by the way, this is not a rule, a lot of script coordinators do spend time in the room on dramas, but I think more traditionally script coordinators on dramas will more work on scripts that are ready to go out and to send them to distribute them to the cast and to the network and producers. And so a writer's assistant will probably spend more of the time in the room on a drama.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, and I was wondering, like the differences. So you also explained that well, and a script manager versus a script coordinator, because you've also been a script manager. What is that difference?
Yeah, so when I was a script manager, I think it was just a difference in what the title was
Ah,
at the place that I was working at the time. But I will say that as a script coordinator on certain shows, you definitely are responsible for supervising direct reports, whereas other shows other positions you may not be. So there is more of a managerial role involved in managing and delegating
hmm.
the workflow to direct reports on shows.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I'm sure that there are a lot of people listening who are saying, "Oh, wow, I didn't know it was that complicated or that multi-layered." Because there are people who think like, "Yeah, people just write it, right? They sit down, they write it, and then they hand the script to the director and the actors, right? Isn't that all it is?" But there's a big team behind these shows.
Absolutely. One of the areas of television that because I've worked in most, if not all, areas of television, but one of my favorites is the traditional multi-camera sitcom space, and that's because I really enjoy the nuances of the workflow.
Hmm.
Talking about you were talking about the process of it all. A script will be written and then we will read it at a table with all the cast and then we'll go back and rewrite that script based on the read that we saw at the table. Then the next day the cast will rehearse on stage with the director. We'll go and we'll see a run through of the material. Then we'll go back and rewrite the script again. And then the next day, traditionally, again, not a rule, but traditionally how it works is then the network will come and see a run through, and then we'll get their feedback, and we'll also maybe see things we didn't see the day before. So it really is a process, and I think it's a wonderful process because it allows you to really find what works in your story and in your episode, and to really hone in on those moments and really make them shine. So
Hmm.
I really do enjoy that process. Not to say that there aren't other things that I love about other areas of the
Right.
business, other ways of producing content, but I do enjoy that, live performance element of the multi-camera sitcom workflow, because it does really seem to me like the closest thing to a stage play,
Oh, very cool.
where
Yeah.
you're really interacting with the material real time.
Yeah. That's very interesting and very cool. Yeah, I think that's why a lot of theater actors have been able to transition to the multi-camera stuff well, is because the way it's shot is probably the closest to being like theater, because they
Yeah,
just do a long take and everything. Whereas
yeah.
sometimes in film, it's not like that.
Yeah, if you look at some of the older sitcom scripts, you would have scenes that would go on for pages and pages and pages,
Yeah.
because it was just a bunch of people, sitting around in one set who were just having a conversation with each other.
Cheers
Uh,
comes to mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've been so lucky over the course of my career to be mentored by some of the writers from Cheers, and
Oh, cool.
um, I absolutely think about those lessons, in my own writing.
Oh, that's cool. There's something that's, and maybe it's just because I'm a child of the '80s, but there is a warm blanket sort of feel that Cheers and shows like that can give me, and maybe it's just because it was what was on when I was a little kid. But that stuff is also very good, and it was very well made, through and through. And I love the acting style of that era. Well, I shouldn't say acting style, because there are some like modern things that I like too, but I like that feel like it's continuous and like it's real life. I like that feel that actors back then really gave to performances, and it happens every so often now, but I love that about those old shows, that theater feel to it.
Yeah, and I think it's important, more now than ever to really be looking around and to see what works or what has worked at different times, and to really sort of find ways to employ that in our art, right? Because all we have is our experience, right? And we're the ones who have to decide, hey, that was something that was a great idea or a way of doing something that really worked, and to use those tools to tell our own stories.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to, hearing you talk about being in a writer's room, I would love to just see the process at SNL and then see what it feels like at the different late night talk shows, because I've not been in those rooms, and I'm just curious as to what the process looks like and feels like, so I can try to emulate it as much as I can when I'm trying to create my own comedy. I feel almost like it's uh, the work process is almost like staring at a blank page and not knowing what to write. It's like the equivalent to that feeling sometimes when I sit down to try to figure out ideas.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say about what you just said is that I think the most important thing when you're creating anything is really just to start. I know that this is something that's talked about a lot in the business, but I definitely think there's a kind of a building a sandcastle component to creating materials, creating stories for me. And most of the time that starts with a spark of a thought. The way that I usually ideate and create stories is I'm always looking for a universal thought that I think either people are all having out in the world at any given moment, or a thought that maybe people have all had at a certain time that may be relevant in the world. And then once I have that, then I can start building characters and perspectives and a world around that. And so I think a lot of my time is spent thinking about what those thoughts may be. I actually just recently started sort of doing that short form on Twitter, and that seems to have been a really popular, way of sharing content. Is finding those universal thoughts that I think people identify with and grab onto. And so once I have that, the thought can really become any form, and just because I've worked a significant amount of my career in film and TV, often it becomes a television script, or maybe an idea for a movie. But a lot of ideas can just be one beat tweets or one beat jokes, and whether you see a road in front of them for development into something that is longer form is a question for whoever's making that decision and what they see in front of them.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious about what you were saying about Twitter, about how that's been helpful for you to find, kind of what people are experiencing and feeling, so that you can then have material, basically. I mean, is that really a fair way to put it, to say that it's a way you're finding material or finding things to write, or is it more about how to express yourself?
I think for me, it was more of a realization that is something that people are looking for, is they're looking for an idea that they identify with, that they feel aligned with, and they're voting with their phones, right? And they're reacting real time to those ideas. There are so many jokes that, and this is something that I've learned over the course of my career. There are so many jokes that make us laugh and giggle and emote in different ways. But I think some of the best jokes that I've heard are ones that make me laugh, but also I'm like nodding my head along, because it's like, I've been through that, or I've seen that, or had that yesterday, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I think people are sort of voting now online with their buttons, with their likes, with their retweets, and I really like to see that feedback, because it really shows me that the material is working and that you can get a direct response from the marketplace. So it's very exciting. It's also obviously something you have to think a lot about before you put something out there, because there's that limited amount of time. But I do try to take great care in the things that I'm sharing online. And, I think that's something we all have to do these days.
Oh, yeah. I think not enough people are taking great care in what they're putting online. I do love the humor that, yes, it makes me laugh, but I'm also nodding my head to it like, yep, I've done that. And I actually just had that experience yesterday because my girlfriend of the show, Justina, and I have both been models for Reductress. And one that they've used a picture of her for was basically, I can't remember the exact way it was worded, but it was basically saying, woman just spent 40 minutes delving into a Twitter beef that of people they don't know or something like that. And it was like, yeah, I wasted my time like that yesterday. You know, I was like, it's a picture of my girlfriend, but it's really me that this reflects because I'm the one who does that between the two of us.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head. And I think some of the best places, online blogs and publications are finding those, those universally connective moments in life and bringing people together, creating content around those ideas. And so, I think there's some fun in the specificity of it all. I think The Onion really nails it a lot of the time with specific headlines that are very well developed, maybe longer headlines, but there's also fun in the very general thoughts. And I think, in my experience, some of the more general thoughts are also maybe more applicable to development, right? So, I'll give you an example. I wrote a script that became a book years ago. And it really it became a story that was based on the idea of, is life fair, right? Are things fair, right? And so from that very idea, that small idea, came this world of characters who represented different perspectives and points of view on that idea, and a story that was woven around this sort of backbone of, is life fair? And so, you can get into these longer developments of these ideas and really explore them through story. Whereas I think something that's much more specific, like your example of, person spends 40 minutes engaging in Twitter dial, and that may be actually a better sketch or a punchline of a joke, something that maybe is less than 5 minutes.
Right. Oh, that's really interesting. And you've written sketches. You did at UCB.
I did the program there, and had some great teachers there. I think at the time I was maybe going to make a go of trying to write for SNL, and I had some people who were loosely connected to the show at the time, and was definitely writing a ton of sketches. I learned some great lessons there about how to think about how sketches are created, how you come up with that initial idea, which I think, like I said, is a universal way of building stories and building content. And I also learned a lot about how sketches escalate and develop as they move forward, right? You think about different ways that a sketch will not only establish what the game is about very early on, but then we'll try to build and develop on that game as the sketch moves forward. I think you hear this a lot too, but it's important to know the rules so you know how to effectively break them. I think also you see a lot of sketches don't necessarily follow that pattern, but I think that the ones that don't find a way to lean into certain aspects of, sketch building that, maybe hit on a few more laughs as you move forward, because it's also important to remember why we're doing these things, why we're making content. It's for the people. So
right. You mentioned to me before when we talked off air about an SNL sketch that you loved because of the writing style of it. But I didn't ever get a chance to see the sketch, but it was a cut for time sketch. Do you remember which one it was?
Yeah, it was a take on Queen's Gambit. And what I loved about it, just kind of speaking about what we were just talking about was that it didn't necessarily follow what I would consider the traditional, way of developing a sketch, because it kind of kept hitting on the same joke over and over. But I love that because they leaned into that. And for me, in that particular instance, for me, it had me, really laughing hard.
I am so excited to do something with you.
We're all obsessed with Queen's Gambit. My pitch for you is Queen's Gambit.
I'm sorry, I'm not really.
Oh, you're not from
getting
New
it.
York. I'm sorry. The sketch would be like pawn. I thought that was a swan, not a chess piece.
Rook to F me.
We on for Queen's Eye for the Gambit guy?
This wallpaper. No.
Hustlers plus chess equals chusslers. Free Queenie. It's like Free Willy, but instead of the whale, it's chess piece.
Queen's Borat. My night.
Dairy Queen's damn bitch.
Damn, bitch. Nope.
It was essentially, I think this probably happens a lot on SNL, because I've worked in similar places where you get to work with a piece of talent on a show, and everybody's really excited to work with that particular person or animal or whoever whatever it is the talent that you're working with, and everybody has their own idea, and they think that their idea is the best way to work with that particular talent. And everybody's just so excited to approach and pitch their idea that you end up with like 50 different totally random ideas for how to approach it. And so that really, to me, was an effective way to share this idea of, oh, we have this great piece of talent. Let's all pitch out our ideas and maybe give people a glimpse into, a behind the scenes example of how things may work on shows sometimes when you have. So, the sketch was basically the star of Queen's Gambit was in her dressing room, and each of the SNL writers and castmates were sneaking into her room to pitch her their idea for a sketch about Queen's Gambit. Kate McKinnon comes in and she says, "Okay, I've got it. Ready? Queen's Gambit." And the star of the show is kind of like, well, isn't that the name of the show? And she's, no, it's in the borough of Queens, right? And then all of a sudden it cuts to you're in Queens, and Kate McKinnon is playing this woman who has a very strong Queens accent, but they're playing chess. And as the sketch continues, not only do people come in and share their other ideas for Queen's Gambit, how they would twist the title and the idea, but they also become increasingly ridiculous. And I think that was something that they really did effectively, because I think that was certainly a way that the sketch built.
Oh, nice. When you were writing comedy, what is it you're trying to go for? I would venture a guess that you are trying to connect with how people feel and what people can relate to. Is that something that goes into what you try to make sure you have in your comedy writing?
Yeah. So what I love about comedy is that comedy has extra challenges for me in writing a script. You have to write a great story that is emotionally satisfying for the people who are reading and or watching, but then it also has to be funny and it has to have jokes. And so, I think a lot of shows, obviously every show does it differently, but most of the shows that I've worked on, we're really trying to focus on getting the story down first. And once we have the story down, and once we have a first or second draft down that really has all the appropriate story beats and flows the correct way to sort of lead our characters and our viewers into the certain act breaks and moments we want to showcase in the story, then we start pitching jokes that align with that story. Now, there are a couple reasons that you do this. The main one being that jokes are very story specific. So if you create a story and then you go see it on stage and maybe you have to tweak the story because it doesn't work the way that you originally intended, or you want to adjust a scene, or you want to change a beat to make something later have more emotional resonance, then maybe you lose a joke that you spent 3 hours trying to come up with in the room. And so you learn to kind of build the script piece by piece in a way that makes the most logical sense. Because honestly, let's face it, most of the time we're working on episodes that are going to be shot, 3 days from when we're working on them. This is how TV works. It's a very fast-paced medium. So really finding a way to be efficient about how you do your work, getting the story down first, and then doing passes for jokes where you're adding jokes based on the beats that serve the story.
I love that approach. I really like that, because sometimes when you watch something, it's a really basic story that is hard to relate to because, they didn't put much thought maybe into it, or they're just like doing the paint by numbers thing with the story side of it. So it's sort of like, okay, this is just sort of low hanging fruit. The comedy has to be really funny. And if it's not, then it could be like disappointing.
Absolutely.
I would almost appreciate something where the story is great and the comedy is okay. It's not low-hanging fruit comedy, but it's also not like the funniest thing I've ever seen. Like, I would much rather watch that than watch something where the story is kind of lame or just too basic.
Yeah, and it also leads you to the question of which one of the two is more subjective, right? And I think it's a good conversation to have. I think that if you are an accomplished storyteller who can really find an idea for an episode or a show that resonates with most people, that you really can't lose, right, on that. The jokes, I think, are something that are, for me, in my experience, a little bit more subjective for each person.
Right.
You bring up SNL. I have countless conversations with friends about, I'll think that a sketch was like the funniest thing in the world. Somebody, it may not be their thing. They may have liked a different sketch from the show, from an episode. And we like these things for different reasons. I think it's all based on our own personal life experience. But like I said before, the IP of the human experience is really, I think, how I most effectively build stories. And I think if you connect with people that way, then the connection and the humor comes from there. I know I'm probably not in my own company when I say that, The Office is really an iconic show that I think we all maybe agree on, right?
Right, yeah.
Part of the reason why that show, I think, was so effective is because the characters were so strong in that show.
That's what she said.
And they all sort of embodied this point of view that we not only recognized, but we understood and wanted to follow. And, I think when you watch a show like that, oftentimes you're laughing at things that aren't necessarily even jokes. You're just laughing. You're laughing because a character's about to do something, or they're about to say something, or they make a face, right? That's when you really know that you've hit on gold, because you already have the audience laughing before you're even telling the jokes.
For sure. That show was so relatable, and it really dialed up maybe the cringeworthy stuff, but it was stuff that people could relate to, because everyone has had a boss that they sort of rolled their eyes about, or pined for someone who was unavailable romantically. Like we've had those experiences in deep ways, and that show really put that at the forefront, and it was chef's kiss good for a few seasons there, several seasons. There was one thing you mentioned a minute or two ago about cutting a joke that maybe you worked on for 3 hours, and of course a lot of people have heard you can't get married to your idea. I mean, people have heard that in sketch writing and improv classes. Like, you can't get married to your idea. You have to accept the natural direction that things go or should go. And I mean, that's just a very universal thing in entertainment. You can't get so married to whatever that you're unwilling to cut. But how frustrating is it to work on a joke for a couple of hours and then realize, I got to cut this joke? Like, is that annoying to deal with?
It absolutely is. And I will say that parts of that process never get easier. But I will also say that that's a very important lesson to learn as a writer. And I think it's something that you can try to adjust your workflow to work around. Like I said before, on most of the great shows that I've worked on, we've really worked hard to get the story down before we hit the jokes. Somebody may pitch a joke very early on that we'll keep in our pocket, and if it works within the story that we end up with later on in the week, we'll try to fit it in and make it work. But if it doesn't work, then it's not used, because the jokes are there to serve the story.
Right.
And so I think that the other thing that's great about coming up with a funny joke that may not work in this particular story is that maybe it works in another story. And I think that some of the best writers that I know are able to put a joke in their pocket or put it in a file, however your brain and your organization system works. And knowing that there's something there that can be used for future material that that is undeniable, just not for this particular project.
Right. I believe I have these details right. There was a sketch that I think got cut on SNL that Larry David wrote, and he ended up using it on Seinfeld. And, it was like one of the most popular episodes of Seinfeld, if I remember correctly.
Hi, it's Carol. I'll get back to you.
Hi. It's George. I didn't realize that coffee didn't really mean... Anyway, it was fun. So, so you call me back. Take it easy. So, you remember I made the initial call Sunday. She doesn't call back. I leave another message. Yesterday, I'm a volcano. The machine comes on, and I let fly like Mussolini from the balcony. You invite me up for coffee, and then you don't call me back for 4 days? I'd like to get one more shot at the coffee just so I could spit it in your face.
I can't believe she never called you back.
She did. She called my office. She said she's been in the Hamptons since Sunday.
So she didn't get the messages?
Exactly, but they're on there waiting.
But what about the messages?
Yeah, I've never heard that story, but it absolutely would make sense to me if that was something that happened, because I think there are also ideas that you'll have. I mentioned this book I wrote a few minutes ago. That book I self-published. It's on Amazon. And that could absolutely become a TV show one day, right? Because I already wrote the script for it as well. And so that's something that. Sometimes things just take you have to find the right moment for them. And so I think part of being a writer, certainly being someone who is, a more seasoned, established comedy writer, is somebody who understands that a great joke may be great in its own right, but not necessarily for this particular moment. And recognizing that and knowing that there's value in it, but also recognizing that the process is going to move forward without it. And also recognizing in a moment, maybe if you're in a writer's room, that your joke that you thought was great, that isn't going to be used, that everyone's moving forward now. So maybe you should start pitching things that are going to be in the show and in the story, and start to, sort of get out of your own head and really come along, because television is a very collaborative process. And I think some of the best writers who I've worked with over the years understand that and value that and appreciate that and work toward that end, knowing that their contributions are a part of the process of making something great together.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's, one of the bedrock principles of, working together is one of the bedrock principles for improv for a reason too, like that's what it is. It's this collaborative thing, and that does help you in other entertainment endeavors. You mentioned your book. Let's talk about your book real quick, because I know, listeners are like, oh, he wrote a book too. Oh my gosh, he's done so much. Let's talk about that. What made you want to write it?
So the time that I came up with the idea, I think, there was a lot going on in the country. And I think a lot of people were walking around and they were asking themselves this question of like, is life fair? And is there any rhyme or reason to how things happen to any one or two given people at any given day? And I came up with this idea of exploring that in a show. And I think I think at the time I was listening to a lot of Radiohead and was listening to the song Karma Police.
I've given up count. This is what you get.
And it just kind of hit me that there would be an amazing show in the idea that there were actually karma police out there who were bringing people what's coming to them, whether good or bad, and really making sense of the world and bringing fairness, behind the scenes. And so that's sort of the initial idea and how I started to develop that world. Came up with some really great characters and put a pilot script together. Shared that around town. Some people really liked it. I think at the time I was much younger and it was very early in my career. And I think the people who were reading it were also younger and it was early in their career. And after the fifth or sixth person told me specifically, write this as a book and self-publish it so that you will control the project from that point forward, I said, hey, you know what? Maybe this is actually a really good idea. And it was actually a very freeing process for me. I had never written anything in that medium before, but it flowed very naturally. I was able to essentially turn each scene into a short chapter, and I ended up with a novella. It's kind of a quick 1 hour read because you're essentially reading a TV pilot in a narrative form. And what was really fun about the writing process for me is that the medium of writing television scripts the action is very constrained. You really want to make sure that when you're writing action, that you're describing things accurately and visually, making them visually appealing, but you're also not using a lot of space on the page. Right. And one of the big differences between scripts and books is that you can spend a half a page in a book describing what a room looks like, or describing what a character is thinking, or something that they want, but not showing it like you would have to in a script. And so I really enjoyed that. It was kind of a way for me to get out of my own comfort zone and do something new and enjoy the differences in writing for different mediums.
That's very nice. Where can people find the book?
It's on Amazon.
Great.
Yeah.
What is something that aspiring writers don't realize is a part of the journey of becoming a writer?
Yeah. So there's so many things. I think the thing that I would probably want to tell people is something that I wish someone told me, which is that it really is like, it's a journey. The whole thing is a journey at any level. And, I don't know that I've ever really felt like, oh, I made it. And I think that's kind of the work of all creative people. But especially for me in film and TV is that you'll work on something for a while, right? And you'll do certain things on that project, and then that project will end. And then you sort of begin the process of getting your material ready, meeting with people in the industry, getting the word out on your own projects, but also your feedback on projects that are going that other people may have that and then beginning the process of finding a new job, right? And or creating something new for yourself. And so it really is a rough road, and you have to decide that that's what you want to do. And it's not something that you decide once; it's something that you decide every day. Because every day you're getting in front of that computer or however you write with that blank page, and you have to write something new every day or every couple days or whatever your routine is. And that never ends at any level, at any point in your career. If you want to write, or if you want to act, or if you want to, sculpt, whatever it is that your craft is, you have to find a way to constantly be doing it. And there are some things that I've read over the years that have really helped me in my own process. I'll give you an example. I think it was Hemingway. I'm not sure exactly, so don't quote me on it, but who it was not as important to what it was, which was, I think it was Hemingway who said that he never finished a chapter at the end of a day of work. He would always leave the end until the next day, because that way he knew that when he started writing the next day, that he had something to write that he had already figured out. And maybe getting that momentum in writing what he would finish the next day would propel him into the next chapter because his brain would already sort of be working and moving. And so I always found that fascinating. And I'm always looking for ways to, to improve upon my own process, if you will.
Oh, that's cool. I thought it was interesting that you were saying you don't consider yourself to have made it. And that's maybe something that's just subjective for people, but what would you consider making it?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've really wrapped my head around that yet. And I don't know that I ever will. I think that is part of being a creative person, is that there's always more to create.
Yeah.
I will say that there have been moments in my career where I felt like I made it in other ways. And I think that those are the moments that I'll never forget. I'll give you an example. So I would say maybe 10, 12 years ago, I was working on a show as an assistant, but I was with a lot of really legendary comedy writers in a room where we were punching a script up. And there was an opportunity to pitch a joke, and I had an idea and I pitched it in the room. And I knew who a lot of these writers were because they were pretty iconic people. And this one woman who I really just was like, I highly respected her and her work, and she was a hero of mine in the industry. She started hysterically laughing at my joke in the room, a genuine, real belly laugh. And I remember this feeling that I had, that I was able to have this one person laugh at my joke, and at the end of the day, she came over to me and introduced herself to me. And she said, I haven't laughed like that in a while. Thank you.
Oh, nice.
And that to me, I mean, that's up there, right? Like any of my other accomplishments, I think pale in comparison to a moment like that.
Yeah.
And there are a few moments like that where I think that to me is I think what you're talking about, maybe just not exactly the same thing. And certainly I was very involved with organizing the script coordinators and the writers' assistants. We were able to negotiate a union contract a couple of years ago. That was a big moment for me. In a weird way, it was kind of like it had nothing to do with creative work or jokes or stories, but it had to do with our own stories and knowing that people who are going to do the work that we did after us would not have to deal with a lot of the harder things that we had to go through, because there were going to be improvements in pay and healthcare and pension contributions. Those types of things, I think, really for me, feel the closest thing to achievement and victory that I have found in my career.
Yeah, and you mentioned you're in the Guild, you're in WGA, and you've been a script coordinator and writer for Sydney to the Max, which is a thing that's going. It's like a thing out there. It's the kids. If you can write something for the kids, I feel like that's a form of making it. And but as you're describing here, there are things that you look back on and you can say, oh, that was a good moment, or that was something. But I think, maybe the way people look at what making it is, or the importance, quote unquote, of making it, needs to shift a little bit, because there is a positive way, and I think you have this perspective. There's a positive way to engage with that whole making it thing, because I've heard that a lot of musicians or singer-songwriters, if you ask them what they think their best song is, then a lot of them have said, I haven't written it yet. And that's because it propels them to keep striving as an artist. And so it makes you not worry or think about the more frivolous accolades or, getting caught up in celebrity that, people can get caught up in the entertainment industry. And it keeps you focused on what's important, which is the art, which is the work. And I think when you're saying what you're saying of like, oh, I still don't consider myself as having made it, as someone who is continuing to strive and work at it and work at getting better.
Yeah, I don't know if you've probably heard this before, that, you should try to leave something better than how you found it. Right. And I think make the story about the laugh and about what we were able to accomplish for people in the writer's assistant and script coordinator craft, they both speak to that end. And I think the idea that you can keep improving on your craft and keep writing better jokes and better stories and better shows also speaks to that idea. And it also, I think it also works because leaving something better than how you found it is an open-ended thing, right? And it's something you can always be doing. And so I think that really is what it all comes down to for me in the work that I've done so far in my career. And those are the experiences that I remember. And I think in remembering them, that serves as the proof that that's really what was meaningful. Because what do you remember, right? What are the things that you collect along the way?
Yeah. What is the process of getting in WGA?
That's a good question. So the way that you get in, there are two levels of the guild. There's an associate membership, and then there's the full membership. They're both based on, I believe, earnings in a certain medium, right? So it's how much you make per given period of time. You have to make it in a certain amount of time. So for my show that I got in on, it was a cable comedy. You needed to write 2 scripts in a period of time to get in. And that was how I qualified for it. I think if you work on a network show, the amounts are higher, so that if it's like an hour-long network show, 1 script, I think may be enough to get you in as a full member. I will say that when I wrote my first script at that time, the first script was enough to get me in as an associate member, but the second one was the one that got me the full membership. So it's based on in earnings in a particular period. And all of this information is, I think, available online if people are curious to look it up.
Cool. Well, I can't believe it. We're at the end of the episode. It's now time to create something together. And I have a couple of ideas. And one was what sort of advice you can give to someone who wants to be a writer, or what sort of advice you can give on how someone can get a job in the writer's room, whether that is as a script coordinator or a writer. Which direction would you like to go with this? Does one pique your interest more than the other?
Maybe becoming a writer, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think one technique that was really meaningful and helpful for me was seeing what a television script looks like. Trying to get your hands, and I think there's plenty of them available online, but really just looking through one, taking some time to look through, try to find your favorite episode of TV, try to find your favorite television show and an episode of that show. And then, take an hour and just flip through it and try to notice how things are arranged and written, the different nuances. Maybe start to take a second hour the next day and start to look at how maybe different characters, their lines are written, and the way that the words are arranged in the lines and on the page. And then if it is something that is your favorite show, try to watch a show as an exercise, and try to write the script of the show that you watch as an exercise to really feel what it feels like to write something that was shot. I think that these were sort of exercises that I worked on when I was doing my writing program at UCLA after I graduated from Florida. And the teachers in that program were fantastic because they were all working writers who, some of them I would see, when I was working at Fox, I would see one of my writers during the day, or one of my teachers during the day, who was running a show at Fox at the time. And he would teach class at night at UCLA. So, a lot of these people are people who are working in the craft who are giving this feedback. And, I think it speaks to the idea of looking at writing as a craft, something similar to drawing or sculpting. Like I said before, it's an art that requires physical work. You're creating a physical product out of thoughts and ideas. And so, mastering that craft is essential to mastery in this business. And I think that, you want to be able to write a great script when opportunity presents itself. So doing the work of knowing how to write a great script is part of your job as being a writing professional who's hopefully going to get some jobs and some opportunities to work in the business.
There it is. This has been a great talk. Thanks so much for being on here, Aaron.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
Very thankful that he joined us to talk all of that stuff about the industry. It was very insightful. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out what Aaron's got going on. You can go to his website, wieneraaron.com, if you want to see all of the stuff that he's worked on and things that he's sharing there. You can also follow him on Twitter at WienerAaron and Instagram at Aaron_M_Wiener. Also buy his book, Karma Police, on Amazon. We got links in bio for all of that. Don't forget to nominate us. We have a link in the bio for that as well. And follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ThereItIsPod. And you can go to ThereItIsPod.com to find out more about the podcast, but also find out how you can subscribe to our Comedy Lifestyle newsletter and support us if you can. We'd appreciate it. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.